Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. How many individuals do you know who have worked for the same employer for over 40 years? And at the same time, been on the front lines of recording local history for the rest of us. In this episode, I'd like to introduce you to one such individual. Ian MacAlpine was a photographer and photojournalist for our local daily newspaper, the Kingston Whig Standard. In the early 80s, he joined a bustling newsroom covering local news and sports events. Over the 4 decades, as with many media outlets, Ian's responsibilities evolved as a result of technology, competition, and consolidation. But I think we should let Ian tell his story. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, David. Thanks for having me.
How's retirement?
Well, it's pretty good. I'm still keeping busy. I haven't put my cameras out to the trash just yet. I teach photojournalism at Loyalist College.
Oh, do you? Okay.
1 day a week. And then I also do freelance photography for Queen's Athletics.
Okay.
Keeps me out of trouble, so.
So your day is pretty well occupied.
Not every day. My weekends seem to be Wednesday and Thursday because
Okay.
I teach Mondays, and then Friday, Saturday, and some Sundays I take photos for
Follow
Queen's
the teams
Athletics.
around.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to throw a phrase that I'm sure you've heard a million times. The phrase is, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And looking back on your 40 years, give me 2 or 3 of your most verbal photos.
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess most of my iconic photos that I could describe. A couple of photos from the ice storm of 1998. How I got up early that day and went out and made it downtown, made it to City Park, Baggett Street, and got a photo of a young man holding his head all wrapped up and going into a paramedic, going out with the paramedics into their ambulance. He decided to go to class that day at Queen's, and he got hit with a branch.
Ooh.
And so that was one of my photos. Another photo could be a couple of police officers from the Ontario Provincial Police rescuing a man out of a swamp in early April of 1998, I believe. Again, same year. He had wandered into the field and he fell into a swamp and he called, "Help!" And these 2 officers came, who ended up being really good friends of mine after that. And that's another one that I could go 1,000 words about, all the backstory to that.
I guess we should tell folks who are listening, some of whom may not be in Kingston or know Kingston at all, that back in 1998 when we had that ice storm, it basically shut down the city and surrounding area for quite a while. I can remember because I lived here at the time, and I think we were without power for 4 days. And the thing we found interesting is that we were a family of 5. And basically what we did is we called up friends and said, we're coming over for supper and a shower, because we didn't have any hot water in the house. So all of these things that happen to people have different experiences with respect to dealing with the issue of having no power at all. And I don't know, were you without power at all when yourself?
Only briefly. I lived on the east side and Rose Abbey Drive, and we moved there in 1990. So all the wires were buried.
Okay,
there,
yeah.
so it's good.
That's the issue, yeah.
So we did have a couple of people as well that came over and wanted to take showers. We were without power for about 2 days, I think, because the storm started on a Thursday, and then we had power on Thursday morning, and then it went out in the afternoon, came back around Saturday, I believe. So it wasn't too bad for us. Where you felt bad for the people who lived on Baggett Street or just north of Princess downtown. All those wires, the poles, and they were out of power for weeks and weeks. It was tough.
Or if you were outside and you could hear the transformers zapping because of the ice and the currents that were flowing through them and all that sort of thing.
And all the you could hear the branches crack as well, which is kind of disturbing.
To a lesser extent, on the day we are recording this episode in January of 2024, we can hear the ice falling off the wires because it's warming up and the ice that's accumulated is starting to fall and crack on the roads. And nothing serious, nothing anywhere near like what happened in 1998, but it gives you a sense of the sorts of things. Let me take you back to when you first picked up a camera. When was that?
I started in, I was a high school student who didn't really know where I wanted to go in life. And I just picked up a camera because I wanted to see how I can get into baseball games and hockey games for free. Montreal Canadiens, Montreal Expos, things like that. I would go to games and I'd see the photographers working and I'd say, wow, what a great job that would be, to be able to photograph a National Hockey League game or Major League Baseball and be right on the sidelines, right next to the players. How great would that be? Mm-hmm. So that was my initial motivation. I only started getting interested in photography after high school. I went to CEGEP in Quebec, which is like community college here, like St. Lawrence College. Yeah. Dawson, and I found a place called Dawson Institute of Photography, which taught me all the basics, film developing and how prints react in the chemicals and things like that, and got shooting with a camera. Bought a cheap Pentax SP1000 and one lens, and then I sort of expanded my collection after a while and built up. Then I had to work a regular office job back in those days, like be an office clerk, and things go in life are interesting how things fall into place. There was a fellow that worked in the office, really nice guy. His best friend worked at the Hockey News magazine, which had a headquarters in Montreal at the time. So I talked to him, and he put me in touch with the editor of Hockey News, nice fellow named Charlie Halpin. And he says, "Oh yeah, I'll get you a pass from the Montreal Forum, and you could take photos and make prints and sell them to us, and everyone we use will pay you $5 per photo." I said, "Great, that's fantastic." So it got me into the Montreal Forum, and there was a room in the Montreal Forum where all the photographers gathered in between, before the game and in between periods. They had hot dogs in there and pop and sandwiches, things like that. And I just got to meet all the great photographers, Montreal Star photographers, Montreal Gazette, Canadian Press, United Press International. And a few of them took me up as mentors. And they started giving me other work. And I started getting more work and more work. I could quit my job at Canadian Pacific Railway and be a photojournalist full-time as a freelancer.
So you're picking their brains between periods.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah.
And they would invite me over to their office, and I found it to be very exciting over there, where you see the pictures come across the wire from across the world, and it's long before the internet, where you could look up a picture from anywhere now. Yeah. But back then, you'd see pictures coming from war-torn places or Washington, D.C. or Ottawa, and think, wow, this is great.
How did you get to Kingston? Like, what brought you to this city?
So what happened was I had built up a portfolio because of the contacts I had made. I worked for Hockey News, but also I had a mentor at Canadian Press named Bill Grimshaw and another fellow named Doug Ball. And they sort of mentored me, and they gave me assignments for Canadian Press to cover a lot of events. I was at the 1980 referendum, for example. I covered the 1981 provincial election. I covered a lot of things in Montreal at the time. So I built up a portfolio, not just of hockey photos, but of all news events, feature, everything. And I built up a portfolio, and I also freelanced for the Montreal Gazette. So I got to know people at the Montreal Gazette. George Cree was the photo editor at the time, really nice man. And he gave me assignments, and I built a portfolio there. Just I would work maybe 3 days a week through Canadian Press or the Montreal Gazette, and it was enough to sustain me to live on my own with a roommate in NDG part of Montreal. I had my own car, and I was able to get around. So when I built up this portfolio that I had, I got to cover Stanley Cup Finals, Canadian Open golf tournaments, women's golf tournaments, a lot of big events in Montreal and around the area. So I built up a portfolio. So when the job at the Kingston Whig Standard opened, I heard, because I did a university football game for the Whig Standard in 1982. I had contacted Jack Chang, who was my future boss, and I said, I can send you some photos on the CP wire of Queens against Concordia in football if you like. And he said, oh, sure, great. So I think he paid me $35 or something like that. And I did that. So my name was in there. And then there was an opening at the Gazette. I forget how, there was an opening at the Whig Standard, but I forget how I found out about it. But I came to Kingston in February of '83 for an interview. Myself and one other fellow, Pierre Obendroff, who now works at the Gazette. He and I had similar paths, going through first as a freelance career, then in the newspaper business. So he came for an interview. I came for an interview. I was the fortunate one to get the job, but about a month later, he got a job at the Montreal Gazette. So he was fortunate as well. So it works, and he's still there today. To this day, he's still working at the Montreal Gazette. So I got here in Kingston and came by myself. I had met my wife Tracy only a few months before, so she stayed in Montreal for a few months, and then she came in September of '83, and we got married in June of 1984, and we've been here ever since. Exactly. There's been some opportunities to move on, but just the things didn't work out the way I thought it would. But still, this is a great community. We have 2 children, and now our parents themselves, and it's worked out really well. It's been a great career and great life in Kingston.
Let's talk a little bit about newspapers in general. And it doesn't really matter where you live. Over the years, most people will have gotten their local news from a newspaper. You came here in 1983. Describe what a newsroom in a newspaper looked like back in 1983.
Well, it was really exciting because we were a afternoon paper when I started. The paper hit the streets, I believe, around 11:30 for the first edition, so right before lunch. So I would come in at 8 o'clock in the morning when I worked the day shift, and the newsroom would just be buzzing. People would be yelling, I need that story now. You only write 10 inches. That's all I need is 10 inches. Is that photo ready yet? Jack Chang would be in the darkroom making sure the front page photo is ready to go. Norris MacDonald, our page editor who recently passed away, he'd be screaming for a headline idea, screaming for another story to come in. So it's really, if you look at back in the day, putting a newspaper together was like a work of art. Like every day, you're putting together a work of art, because with the technology, the technology was coming around. It wasn't lead type when I started. It was type was on heated plastic pages, and the type was raised up and it was put on the drum. So compositors, people that laid out the pages. It was a union shop, so they laid out the page with the editor over the shoulder, telling them where to put the headline, where to put the photo, where to put this column of print, and if you were an editor and you touched something on the table where the compositor was, that could be a union violation. That was their domain. That was
not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. So, but every day that happened, and we back in those days we had like 32 pages a day sometimes. 24 pages, 32 pages.
How many people working in the newsroom then, roughly?
We thought there were like 75.
75
altogether, and about 200 people working at the paper, because back then it was, you had to do everything. We weren't in a chain. We were owned by Michael Davies' family, and so we'd had to do the newsroom, compositing, printing, sales, advertising, sales, circulation. Everyone in our office did that. We didn't farm anything out. Mm-hmm. And over the years, when we were bought by a few different chains, that of course all that changed. But back in the day, it was quite exciting to be at the paper, and we were lucky because we were an afternoon paper. If something big happened in the morning, we could get out and get a picture of it and get it on the page, and it would be at people's door at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the paper arrived. You
mentioned Michael Davies, and for those who don't live in town, the Davies family have been and continue to be, in one way, shape, or form, a big influence on the city. They own the newspaper going back several years. They also own the radio and TV station at one particular point, at least members of the family did. So a very prominent family, and it was locally owned. The newspaper was for a long, long time before it was bought by a chain. If we're talking about what it looked like back in 1983, What did it look like when you retired last summer? Like compare the two in terms of the newsroom. How many people would be there now? Because you are part of a chain.
Wow, it's the shrinkage has been just amazing over the last 20 years, because all of our departments were farmed out. We've been owned by several different companies. Michael Davies sold the Whig Standard in 1990 to Southam, and Southam was pretty good to us. They let us do what we wanted to do for the longest time, and then they started getting it more involved, and there were some layoffs here and there, some consolidation of departments. And we've been owned by Southam, we've been owned by Sun Media, we've been owned by Quebecor, we've been owned by Hollinger, not necessarily in all that order, and still most recently Post Media, which we're still I still say we, but I'm not working there anymore. But we're owned by Post Media. So with the technology and the newspaper business kind of going downhill with all the different ways to get your news, I believe we're down to 5 reporters, which are called multimedia journalists now. We don't have photographers and reporters. We have multimedia journalists, so you have to learn to do both, which I learned to do in the last 15 years of my career, being a grade 10 failure of English class. I end up getting paid for a living to write stories, so I was able to learn on the fly.
Where's that English teacher now?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I did have in grade 11, I had a teacher. Ironically, her name was Mrs. MacAlpine, MC Alpine instead of MAC. Really good teacher, and she really motivated me to do better than I was doing. So I think I have to thank her wherever she is now for helping me out. So I've been owned by many different chains, and a lot of those, and with the technology, they amalgamate. The circulation is amalgamated. Our press room was closed 15 years ago, and the paper's been printed in Toronto. It's been printed in Ottawa. So what happens is the pages are sent electronically to those places, and the paper is printed there and trucked back to Kingston. So that's been a long time. So we don't have a printing press anymore. Advertising sales, we've cut back on the advertising sales, which is kind of hard to understand since that's your bread and butter to make money. But we've consolidated that, and a lot of it's done from out of town. Page layouts done out of town. We have 2 editors in town currently, and they send the stories and the pictures, and they get laid out in, I'm not sure where, Hamilton or Burlington or something like that, and those pages get sent electronically back to Kingston to proofread, and then off to our printing plant, which I believe is in Ottawa now, and the paper gets printed there.
I think that what is going on with the newspaper industry is something that is going on with media in general all over. With my background in radio and I know a little bit about TV, a lot of the stuff is farmed out to other communities, and so there is a lot of consolidation going on. Basically, things are expensive. They're not generating as much revenue, so they have to consolidate. Let's talk about the technology that has brought about this change. I would gather that cameras themselves have changed from the day you picked one up back in Montreal to the cameras that you continue to use these days. Without getting too technical and going over our heads, what sorts of things have cameras changed? How have they changed over the last several years?
Well, on the outside, they look about the same. If you look at a camera from 1979 when I started to today, they look the same. They're all built for right-handed people. Everything's on the right side as you're taking the photo with your right index finger. The lenses go on pretty well the same way, so they're about the same that way. But everything else has changed. I used film cameras from 1983 at the Whig until early 2000s, 2003, I believe. We got our first digital camera. And it was a Canon D30, which I thought was really, really good. But it turned out it wasn't the greatest camera, like for motor drive and catching the right moment. But it took nice photos, and we've been just going ever since. We've been going up and up and up with the quality of the camera. The higher the resolution of the photos that these cameras produce are really, really good now. So I own now a Canon 7D and a 6D, and they're very high resolution cameras. Pictures are beautiful coming out of them. A good thing that Canon did back when they had film cameras is they kept the same lenses. So if you had a bunch of lenses that fit onto a Canon film camera, you could use them on a Canon digital camera when the digital cameras came out. Whereas with Nikon, everything was changed at the same time, which I think Nikon had a bit of, their business went a bit down because people had to just pay thousands of dollars for new equipment if they wanted to keep using Nikon. But well, that's how it's changed. And of course now with iPhones now, I could go through. I didn't like to do it. If I had to, I did use my my iPhone for news photography because the resolution's good on those camera phones. But there's certain limitations to them. You can only use them really when the lighting is good and you're fairly close to your subject. You can't use it for sports, things like that.
Yeah, when you were in news, I'm sure that there were times when you weren't always carrying the Canon around with you, but you always had your iPhone in your pocket.
Yes, the last 20 years.
Something.
Last 20 years.
Let's question, how many cameras do you have at home now?
Just those two.
Just two?
And I do have a collection of film cameras on a shelf in the basement that I don't use anymore. Another quick thing about the technology, I have a camera. This 6D camera is quite neat because I could be in a farmer's field in the middle of nowhere. As long as I can get cell phone coverage, I can take a picture with my professional camera, the 6D, and I can transfer it into my iPhone. I can crop the photo and send it back to the Whig Standard to be published. So I did that on a number of occasions where I was able to, on deadline, you're at an accident scene or you're fire or there's a headshot of someone you need to get on deadline. I've been able to do that. So the technology has helped over the years, and also all the processing. I would finish photographing for a day, and I'd have to 2.5 to 3 hours. I'd be in a darkroom. Developing the film, printing the photos, typing cut lines, making sure it's all together. And that 2.5 hours now, same amount of workload would be 15 minutes on a laptop now.
Things have changed quite dramatically.
Yes.
Let me talk a little bit about photography, if you don't mind. The reason is I was sort of surfing TV one night looking for something to watch, and I came across a documentary that is hosted and produced by the actor Jason Momoa. And for those people who may not know the name, if you know the movie Aquaman, he's the fella that starred as Aquaman. So he's a big, burly, long-haired, bearded kind of guy, always laughing and smiling. And he decided that he wanted to host a documentary series. There's only 8 episodes in the series. And he was talking to people that he thought were similar to him in the way he felt about stuff. And the first one was about people who built motorcycles because he's a motorcycle fanatic. The second show was about his favorite photographer. And the photographer's name is Todd Hido, and I don't know if you know the name. He's apparently a well-known photographer in the States. And the whole episode was Jason following this fellow around and watching him take pictures. And he liked to take, it wasn't news photography, it was more for artistic reasons. He was taking the pictures. It took a lot of night shots where he'd focus on a house and a light would go on and the shadowing and the mist and just creating some sort of effect. And I'm wondering if you've ever thought about the differences between photojournalism and the kind of photography that's related to artistic expression.
Oh, definitely. When I was working, some of our photos were like that because sometimes the news in Kingston, there's not a lot of it. So you'd have to go and look for something to put in the paper. And if you've got a good sunset photo, or if you got a good picture of hay bales in the sunset, those pictures they use in the paper. So there are some artistic angles you could take as a photojournalist. My favorite photojournalists are the fellows and the women that work for Sports Illustrated. They were like superstars to me. Yeah. And or even Associated Press photographers, some Canadian press photographers like Doug Ball, I mentioned before, Rod McIver. These guys are great friends of mine, but I look up to them because they were the ones that got these iconic photos back in the 60s and 70s. And If you remember Robert Stanfield dropping the football, that was Doug Ball's picture, and that ended up Mr. Stanfield losing the election in 1974, looking clumsy.
The classic picture that I remember from back then was Robert Stanfield eating a banana. And for some reason, that attracted a lot of attention. And when you're talking about sports photography, is it always a case of right place, right time? Or is there more involved from the photographer's perspective?
Well, it's much more involved. You have to know your sport. You have to know that, okay, there's Kingston Frontenacs have a power play, so I'm going to make sure I focus on the net of the opponent because Kingston Frontenacs will have some chances to score. Baseball game, it's 1 out and the team's fastest player got a walk. So I have to know that he's probably going to try to steal second base. Football, when it comes to 1st and 10, I'll position myself probably 5 yards past the 10-yard sticks. So I know I have a telephoto lens, so I know I can get a picture of the runner, the running back going through the offensive line trying to gain yards. If I know it's second and 10, maybe I'll walk a little bit further down the line because I think the quarterback's going to drop back and he's going to pass to someone like 15-yard pass.
Yeah. And
I like to be equal with the pass receiver who's going to try to catch the ball, and it's going to be a battle for the ball in the air. So I have to be ready for that, and I have to. It takes a lot of training, but you have to because the ball goes in the air and it's in the air for about 2 seconds, 3 seconds. So you have to change your focus from the quarterback to the receiver. So you have to, with a long telephoto lens, you have to find where the receiver is, wait for their eyes to light up like they're going to catch the ball, then you let the motor drive go. So every sport and every news event, there's a certain way to cover things. And it comes to be instinctual after a while.
Getting to football, if you're talking about running along the sidelines to try and get the right angle or get the right focus on a particular player, when you're running and you have to stop the running, pull the camera up to your face and take the picture, I mean, there's got to be a technique involved in terms of you're panting because you have been running and you want to make sure you're holding the camera steady when you take that picture. Obviously, that's something you learn how to do, but I would think that would be difficult to learn.
Well, you don't necessarily run from one spot to the other because there is a huddle.
Yeah.
So when they huddle, you have a chance to walk at a brisk pace, I would say, to get to where you want to be. And it's interesting because when that ball's in the air, because if you know the sport, the ball's in the air, and you know how to, and you can always try to find. It's not 100%, but you usually can find who the receiver is going to be. As soon as you see you have your camera just down a bit, so you can look at with your bare eye at the quarterback. You see which direction he's throwing in. If he's going to the far sidelines, or if he's going to the middle of the field, or he's coming to your side, then you're able to anticipate that. The trouble with that is sometimes I don't get the picture if the ball is being thrown in my direction because I'm too close to the receiver and the defensive back. But if it's in the middle of the field or on the other side of the field, I usually can get the shot while it's in the air. You can pick up the receiver and the receiver's eyes light up and his hands come up, and you can get the ball. Usually get him coming into his hands.
Now, have you kept a gallery of some of your favorite photos?
Yeah, I would have brought them today, but we're a podcast, not a visual thing, so we couldn't show anybody. But yes, I have a collection of prints, plus I have a collection of images on CDs as well.
It's not something that people can access.
What they can access if they go to my Facebook page and scroll really far back. In the last year of work, I did a thing called Photo Memories, where I'd have a photo that I had taken years before, and I wrote the story behind the story on it. So there are a lot of funny memories of situations that I got into to be able to get that photo, and it turned out to be quite popular. I was surprised how popular it was. People say I should put it into a book.
Yeah,
but I don't think I have enough quite stories for that. But so that's how mostly people can see things.
Now, given that this particular program that we are doing right now is a program about people who are passionate about what they do, I would imagine that a lot of the people that you've taken pictures of have some sort of passion that you want to try to capture with a picture. Any particular people that you've taken pictures of in the past that come back to you as you think about some of the special people?
There's so many. I know what you mean about that. It's there's many people out there, local people and athletes, and there's all kinds of people that in different walks of life that I would, but I can't really place one kind of thing. Like Don Cherry's also good for a few stories. I've sat in on him. Myself and my colleague Patrick Kennedy have sat with him at the General Wolfe Hotel on Wolfe Island when he had a cottage there, and I had a nice time sitting with him. It was like watching Coach's Corner with expletives, which was quite entertaining. So I met a few people, like that.
Don Cherry is a former coach in the NHL, and he has long been a commentator for hockey games, and he is a resident of Wolfe Island and continues to be. I think he grew up on Wolfe Island, did he not?
He grew up in Kingston.
Okay, in Kingston.
Him and his brother Dick, who I'm friends with, who still lives in Kingston. And he had a cottage on Wolfe Island when he bought it when he was coach of the Boston Bruins in the late 70s. But he sold that a few years ago, so he's not on Wolfe Island anymore. He lives in Toronto now with his second wife. He's just about to turn 90 years old, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He did Coach's Corner till about 5 years ago, I believe, and then it was time to move on at that point. Yeah. Don Cherry is a bit of a old school gentleman with his opinions, and one of those opinions got him in a bit of trouble, so he decided to retire at that time.
Well, listen, I want to thank you very much for all the stories that you have shared with us through your photography, and all the best going forward. Thanks very much for participating today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, David. I really appreciate the offer.
My guest in this episode was Ian MacAlpine, retired photojournalist with our local daily newspaper, the Kingston Whig Standard. Any and all comments are appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back soon with another conversation.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to the kingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.